Often called the green heart of Italy, Umbria welcomes you with a gentle, varied landscape whose soft rolling hills frame the panorama, creating a particularly charming natural environment. Here, everything seems to assist nature in a search for serenity, mysticism and peace. We should not be surprised, therefore, that it was here that one of the greatest saints in the history of Christianity was born and laboured. He was Francis, whose name gave eternal fame to this town, Assisi. It was first an Umbrian city and then Etruscan, until it was conquered by the Romans, whose splendid testimony is the Temple of Minerva, dating back to the 1st century. The era of the medieval communes saw the city expand. In about 1000 AD, Assisi fought fiercely with nearby Perugia, at first Ghibelline and then Guelph and Papal. Francesco also took part in those battles. He was born the son of a rich fabrics merchant and in his youth more devoted to youthful adventures than his future mission of peace and love. Many monuments record that glorious period, including the imposing Rocca Maggiore, dominating the city with its fortified stronghold. Then there are the many churches, San Pietro, whose Romanesque facade shows Gothic influences, the Chiesa Nuova in Baroque style, next to the home of Francis's parents, and the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore, which was the first cathedral of Assisi, built on the remains of an old Paleo-Christian house of worship. The change in the city came in 1207, when a voice from a crucifix in the small oratory of San Damiano converted the young Francis and made him one of the most famous religious figures in history. Still today, every angle, every corner of the city recalls the great adventure of the saint. The Santuario di Rivotorto still preserves the simple beds of the monks. The Eremo delle Carceri is a marvellously quiet place where the saint liked to take refuge and where there is still the oak tree that witnessed his preaching to the birds. The Porziuncula, the small oratory that is now part of the great Basilica of Santa Maria degli Angeli, and where the Franciscan order was born, and where Francis died in 1226. Finally, there is the monumental basilica dedicated to the saint, a few years after his death, that is one of the most important Christian sanctuaries, besides being an extraordinary museum of art. The basilica complex comprises two superimposed churches. The lower, more quiet and mystical, that preserves the remains of the saint and is enriched with beautiful frescoes by Giotto, Cimabue, Simone Martini and many others. The upper church is ample and luminous, but still solemn in its Franciscan simplicity, emanating a fascination and charm without equal. The greatest artists of the 13th century worked here, and these frescoed walls and ceilings represent the greatest change Western painting ever experienced, the one brought about by Giotto. The great Tuscan painter, only in his 30s, worked on the 28 paintings devoted to the life of St. Francis from 1297 to 1299. He brought about very important stylistic innovations that marked the most significant change in medieval painting. This is a very special place where art, culture and beauty merge to create a unique atmosphere. We move on to Perugia, which, with Terni, is one of the largest towns in the region. Ancient and noble, the city preserves marvellous examples of medieval art, beginning with the splendid Piazza 4 Novembre in the Etruscan and Roman part of the city, and surrounded by elegant medieval palaces like the Palazzo De Priori, the cathedral, and the splendid Fontana Maggiore. For years, Perugia has also been a modern young city, invaded by the cheerful charm of young people from all countries who attend the famous University for Foreigners. Moving into the heart of the region, we encounter another small jewel, Spello, the place that most preserves the memories of ancient Rome. The inscription on the front of the arch welcomes us to this ancient town while recalling the great empire of the past. A little further on is the imposing Porta Consolare, the ancient entrance into the city, dating back to the 1st century AD. As we go up the Via Consolare, we admire the fascinating beauty of this small town, built with the beautiful stone of Subasio, giving it a unified, elegant look. A widening of the street brings us to Santa Maria Maggiore, dating from the 12th century and flanked by an elegant Romanesque bell tower. Inside the church are interesting works of art, including the marvellous Cappella Baglione, with frescoes from 1501 by Pinturicchio, depicting the Annunciation, the Nativity, the Disputation of Jesus with the doctors of the church, and above, the 4 Sibyls. Another rather special church is that of Sant'Andrea, dating from the 13th century. The interior has a splendid painting on wood by Pinturicchio, created in 1508, depicting the Madonna and saints. Over the main altar is a large wooden crucifix by an unknown Umbrian artist. Surrounded by olive groves, the town of Narni clings to a high rock and is encircled by the Nera River in one of the many wonderful landscapes of Umbria. The location of the town has always been important. The ancient Umbrian centre Nequinum was conquered by the Romans in 299 BC, and the Narnia colony that followed was the bridgehead for Roman penetration throughout the region. Today it is a beautiful, sunny, medieval town, rich with important works of art. In Piazza De Priori is the Palazzo De Priori, flanked by a tall, slim tower. On the front is a small pulpit used for announcing edicts in medieval times. The palazzo preserves a grandiose loggia from the 14th century attributed to Gattapone. Facing it is the imposing Palazzo del Potestà from the 13th century, now the town hall and municipality offices. The centre of the town is the Piazza Garibaldi, once known as the Piazza del Lago, due to the large cistern from the Roman area in its centre. The piazza is flanked by the cathedral, a Romanesque building from the 12th-13th centuries dedicated to San Giovenale, the Bishop of Narni in the 6th century. It was consecrated by Pope Eugenio II in 1145. Built in Romanesque style, it has an elegant portico from the late 15th century, adorned with a beautiful Renaissance frieze. The interior, with 3 naves, is rich in works of art, including sarcophagi, wooden statues, mosaics and frescoes from the 5th and 6th centuries. Many other cities helped to create the legend of a region that never fails to amaze. Here we are in Orvieto, sitting boldly on an immense tufa rock. It makes the town look like a kind of island emerging from the surrounding plain. We go up to the historic centre in a modern funicular that arrives in just a few minutes. The city that greets us is medieval and Renaissance, even though there are many traces of an older culture. To get a panoramic view of the entire town, we go up 42 meters in the Torre del Moro. From here, the scene below is particularly impressive. It is a huge natural rock, whose steep, impassable walls form a perfect town, an inhabited centre that is practically impregnable and without any need for walls. Among the houses are elegant older monuments, solemn testimonies of an ancient history. One of these is the Palazzo Del Popolo from the 13th century. At first intended as an important public building, it still preserves within its walls the ancient remains upon which it was built. Orvieto's extraordinary natural security persuaded many popes to take up their summer homes there. For example, Pope Clement VII took refuge here with his court in 1527 during the sack of Rome by French troops. It was then that Antonio da San Gallo the Younger built the immense well that is still functioning and is today one of the most famous attractions of the city. The most celebrated site in the town is the cathedral, one of the highest expressions of Romanesque Gothic architecture in Italy. The dazzling facade, built during various centuries by the most renowned artists of the day, is an impressive masterpiece of art and design. The spectacle continues inside, where the imposing architecture, the marvelous frescoes, the solemnity and beauty of the surroundings all leave the visitor breathless. The most exciting experience is the Chapel of San Brizio, with its cycle of frescoes begun by Beato Angelico and completed by Luca Signorelli on the theme of the end of the world. It is a work that, due to the complexity of its cultural references and the power of its images, is one of the greatest works of art of all time. Another cathedral, no less famous, greets us in another great Umbrian town, Spoleto. The city is an architectural jewel where history and culture emerge at every corner. splendid testimony of the Roman era is the theatre from the first years of the empire. The Arch of Druso was built in the 1st century AD in travertine as a monumental entrance to the Forum. This is Piazza Mercato, the busy heart of the town with its theatrical fountain built in 1746 to satisfy the Roman taste for water displays. This is San Domenico, whose construction began in the middle of the 13th century. Its simple, austere facade contrasts with the solemn, spacious beauty of the interior, with its many statues, sculptures and frescoes from the 14th and 15th centuries. Finally, we come to the most celebrated image, the cathedral, a marvellous example of Romanesque art that for almost 50 years has provided the spectacular backdrop for the Festival of Two Worlds. This important cultural event has made the town famous throughout the world. Built in Romanesque style in the 12th century, the cathedral has a spectacular facade dominated by a beautiful Byzantine image of Christ enthroned. The interior preserves marvellous works of art by renowned artists such as Bernini, Pinturicchio, Filippo Lippi and Annibale Carracci. Surrounded by a 14th century city wall, Norcia is immersed in a wonderful amphitheatre of hills and woods. The name of the town is linked to a famous gastronomic creation, salamis and truffles, but the spirit of the city is full of history and mysticism. The town is the birthplace of twins who were destined to become famous and whose lives are still very much part of the town today. The twins were Benedict and Scholastica, who were born around the year 480. The message of Saint Benedict, founder of the Benedictine monastic order, is based on prayer and work, and it has survived the centuries as a fundamental part of Christianity. The heart of the city is the piazza dedicated to the saint. It is dominated by the Gothic basilica, built around 1200. Beside the church is the Palazzo Comunale, with its 13th century portico and many works of art inside. The piazza is closed off by the massive bulk of the Rocca, also called the Castellina, built by Vignola in 1554. Another curiosity is the edicola or shrine. It is a small construction in local limestone by Vanni Tuzzi, dating from 1354. Finally, there are two interesting churches, the Church of St. Francis from the 14th century, with its beautiful rose window on the facade and richly decorated doors to the side, and the Gothic Church of St. Augustine, dating from the 13th century, with pointed arches and beautiful frescoes inside. we move on to the southern part of the region to visit another charming town, Amelia. Its strategic importance is still obvious today in the imposing walls that surround it, made of enormous blocks of stone laid with incredible skill. They constitute a formidable bulwark against any aggressor. Of the 4 gates that give access to the town, the best preserved is the Porta Romana, elegant and imposing in the beautiful reconstruction carried out at the end of the 16th century. The city is crossed by a series of streets ending in numerous palazzos of various periods, giving the residential area a dignified tone. This is the beautiful Church of St. Francis, with its charming cloister from the 16th century. The interior, spacious and spectacular, is in the form of a Latin cross and was restructured in 1767. The 15th century chapel of St. Anthony is very interesting and preserves the tombs of the Geraldini family, carved by Agostino di Duccio in 1477. Another beautiful church is that of St. Augustine, dating from the 14th century, with its wonderful Romanesque Gothic facade. The interior, reconstructed in late Baroque style in 1747, contains many frescoes. The most important church in the town is naturally the cathedral. It was built over the highest point in the residential area in the 11th and 12th centuries, on the site of Roman foundations. It is flanked by the imposing Torre Civica, whose interior is truly impressive. It has one large nave with 10 side chapels, adorned with many works of art and other decorative features. We leave Amelia and continue along the ancient Via Amerina, immersed in landscapes of wonderful peace and beauty. Our next stop is Lunano Inteverina. Located in the midst of a splendid green valley, it was the seat of various noble families. Their residences made the town particularly elegant. The village was founded in 600 AD, and in 1400 it became a free commune. major attraction of the town, worthy of a visit in itself, is the Collegiate Church of Santa Maria Assunta, one of the most significant Romanesque constructions in the entire region. Built during the second half of the 12th century, it has a stupendous facade with a pronaos or porch added in 1230 and 4 bare columns. The interior, in the form of a Latin cross, has 3 naves divided by 4 columns surmounted by capitals with various decorative motifs. The floor, in the Cosmati style, is composed of strips of white, green and red marble, symbolic colours linked to the 3 theological virtues. Among the many other artworks is a crucifix, a fresco of the Umbrian Giotto school of the 13th century, the beheading of John the Baptist by Livio Agresti, and finally the valuable 15th century triptych by Niccolò di Liberatore depicting the Assumption, the patron saint of the city. A few miles from Lunano, a majestic castle takes us back to the heart of the Middle Ages. We're in Alviano, the birthplace of a renowned condottiere, Bartolomeo, who succeeded in transforming the ancient fortress into one of the most splendid residences in Umbria. Recently restored, the building is well worth a visit, from the beautiful square courtyard to the chapel of St. Francis, whose frescoes recall episodes and miracles from the life of the saint. There is also the beautiful Museum of Farming Life, located in the large rooms of the basement, with its memories of days gone by. Of course, you can't leave Alviano without strolling along the streets of the medieval district around the castle. It is a wonderful, intact environment from which you can quickly reach the serenity of the great valley below, another marvellous part of a region of infinite beauty. Our last stop in this wonderful region is one of its gentlest and most spectacular spots. We're in Todi, surrounded by rolling hills and fertile land, where peace and good living invite your mind and body. This is a very special place. So special that some years ago, a US magazine named it the most livable town in the world. Just outside the town is one of its most famous monuments, Santa Maria della Consolazione, a renowned example of Umbrian Renaissance. It is attributed to Bramante and contains the venerated fresco from the 14th century depicting the Madonna della Consolazione, whose miracles caused the church to be built. The real heart of the town is Piazza Del Popolo, dominated on one side by an imposing facade of the cathedral. The other sides contain three public buildings housing civic offices: the Palazzo del Capitano, Palazzo del Popolo, and Palazzo De Priori. On the remaining side of the piazza rises the Majestic Cathedral, which was built in the 12th century. large solemn interior contains numerous works of art, beginning with a large fresco by Ferrau da Faenza, dating from the 16th century, depicting the universal judgment. Another celebrated church is San Fortunato, built at the end of the 13th century. It holds the remains of the most famous person from the town, a monk called Jacopone, who made an original literary contribution by writing the first poems in the common tongue in 1200, using Italian rather than Latin. We've come to the last symbol of this magic, fascinating region, a unique part of Italy. A visit here recounts the long history of Italy, and we have a strong impression of having lived, for a moment, an unforgettable experience.